Governor Kathy Hochul laying out her plan for New York in her State of the State address. Hear from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle as they react to the governor's proposed direction for the state. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm Jamie DeLine. John Gray is off this week. Governor Kathy Hochul giving lawmakers and residents a look at what she hopes to accomplish this year in Albany. Topping the list of issues are affordability, public safety, and mental health. Digging into the top proposals, a $1 billion tax cut for middle class would benefit over 8 million taxpayers that make less than $300,000. Another proposal is rebate checks sent out to taxpayers to help offset inflation. When it comes to crime, a new plan would unite over 100 agencies to track crime trends. One proposal would provide free community college to SUNY and CUNY schools. This would be for students ages 25 to 55 pursuing associate degrees in certain fields, such as nursing, teaching, technology, and engineering, among others. One education official explaining how the measure could help the state supply a workforce to address shortages in those industries.
Micron and the supply chain companies are going to bring 50,000 jobs to the Syracuse region. We want to help prepare that workforce. Onondaga Community College has a simulated clean room to help people get ready for jobs at Micron. This commitment from the governor will make that pipeline even stronger.
The governor also proposed expanding laws regarding involuntary commitment, the goal being to assist those who do not have the mental capacity to care for themselves. An official with the Office of Mental Health explaining the holistic approach the administration is taking to address mental health needs.
The important thing is the expansion of the services that hopefully will end up eventually enabling individuals to get services without needing to be committed.
Joining us now to give additional insight and reaction to the governor's State of the State address is Assembly Member Will Barclay. He's the Assembly Minority Leader, and we also have Assembly Member Pam Hunter. She's a Democrat representing the 128th District. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
So, Leader Barclay, we'll start with you. What were your initial thoughts when it comes to the governor's State of the State address?
Well, what I've been saying to a lot of people, I'd say, welcome to the party, Governor. I was pleased that she's finally talking about two of the biggest issues I think that New Yorkers are concerned about, affordability and crime. Actually, on affordability, she borrowed some of the ideas that came out of the Assembly Republican Conference, so I was pleased with that. Obviously, that's what New Yorkers are concerned about. So when she's talking about it, I'm happy to hear it. And we got to see if she can be willing to spend the political capital to get this thing done this year.
And Assembly Member Hunter, what were your initial thoughts?
I thought she did a great job, and I thought the message that she delivered was spot on to what constituents and residents of New York are talking about. Obviously, we're going to have to dig down into the details. We didn't get 300 pages worth of information in I guess, the 45 minutes that she spoke, but I think the foundation is strong, and we're on a path to getting a good budget in for April.
And what were some of the proposals that really stuck out to you?
For me, it was the child care credit, lowering taxes. I think we'll see how that works with the inflation reduction checks that folks are going to be getting at their homes. But I think anything where we can get more childcare, the child care tax credit, the reduction of the middle income tax earners, I think that's huge. They're the ones who are bearing all of the burden right now in our state, and I think that's going to be huge for them. The helping out first-time home buyers is going to be critical. You know, we're having a housing crisis and a shortage, so helping them along the way, getting to the path for home ownership. And I like what, she presented relative to moving along some things with the renewable energies.
And Leader Barclay, what did you think about the whole child care proposal?
Well, as I said, that was a proposal our conference has been advocating for a long time. In fact, her proposal is more rich than what we were proposing. We proposed, I think, a $500 tax credit for a child, where I think she's at $1,000. So interestingly, she took it up a notch. So I'm happy to hear that. I'm always happy when we give money back to the taxpayers. And like my good friend and colleague, Pam Hunter, I was pleased with the middle class tax cut that she was talking about. That was sort of surprised because I don't think she revealed that part of the proposal before. The governor reveals some of her big key policy issues before she actually gives a speech, but I wasn't aware of that one. But the one thing I would say, Jamie, and I rail on this all the time, is New York is a very tax and spend state, and we've been spending a lot of money. In fact, the state budget now is about $240 billion, and on a per capita basis, we spend more money in New York State than any other state. And I never think that's sustainable because you have to obviously get that money from somewhere, and unfortunately in New York, we get it from the taxpayers. So I am pleased that she's announcing all these tax cuts, which I think are great, and even the rebate program, which essentially she's taking money from the taxpayers and giving it back to some of the taxpayers. I don't think that's the most efficient way of doing it, but again, I'm like Pam, I'm happy to see New Yorkers get some of their hard-earned money back to them. But ultimately, we're also going to have to match these up to have a balanced budget. We can't continue to spend like we have. So the difficult side of the ledger is going to be how is she going to come up with cutting some spending or at least slowing the growth of spending, so we can afford to give back the money back to the taxpayers, which we ought to do.
And I believe next week is when we'll have a better idea of how things will be broken down in the budget. Was there anything that you didn't like in her speech?
If you're asking me, the only thing, it's not that I didn't like it. I did like that she raised crime. She talked a lot about the situation on this New York City subways, and rightfully so, that has been problematic. She talked about involuntary commitment, by basically letting people with mentally ill be able to commit them, which I think is good. I actually liked her comment about it being more of a compassionate viewpoint rather than penalizing someone for that mental health. So I would support that. But I think we have bigger problems also on crime, or larger problems. And this is probably where I differ with Pam a little bit. Some of the policies that have been instituted in our state, like bail reform, like raise the age, like parole, I think are contributing to the problem we're having with crime. So I would have liked to seen her take on those and say she'll reinvestigate those. We'll take a fresh set of eyes on that and be open to continuing to, I guess, call it reforming the criminal justice system so we really can protect our citizens going forward. And I think that's unfortunately been missing from her in her past policy proposals, and I didn't hear a lot of that, unfortunately, in her State of the State.
And Assemblymember Hunter, would you like to respond to that? What were your thoughts on the governor's proposals when it comes to crime? And is there anything that she didn't mention that you wish you would have?
I think I'll take the latter first. I think in mental health, the scope of mental health is far broader than just those who are committing crimes. And we see it with young people, young school age, folks. Obviously, I'm a veteran. We see it across the lines with veterans as well. So I would like to see that conversation expanded more outside of just the criminal justice area. I think we have a lot of work to do with substance abuse, mental health. It could be that's the trigger to start someone down the path of a criminal justice, I guess, pathway or career. So hoping that we'll be able to expand that conversation a little bit more. I think relative to crime, when we instituted the bail reform laws, and I think that's one of the only laws since I've been in the legislature that we have taken a crack at multiple times. Normally, we always say, well, go back and change something if we need to. And then sometimes that never happens. And we've done this multiple times. I do think, though, with criminal justice, and especially with some of the things that we've passed, there needs to be a deeper dive. And hopefully the governor can, with her leadership, move this forward. What is happening at the grassroots level with law enforcement and also the district attorneys? Because there seems to be a lot of confusion, especially in community meetings that I go to, where law enforcement will say, well, there is more that we can do, especially within the confines of the law that has been passed, and it's not happening. So I don't understand, until something else changes, I'd like to get more clarity as to where there seems to be a stopgap. And I don't know if it's this discovery that she has put forward that needs to be addressed, and maybe that's going to be the aha moment that moves everything forward. But there definitely seems to be a disconnect with how the law was written, how it's being interpreted by the courts, how it's trickling down to enforcement on the grassroots, on the ground with law enforcement. I do think that needs to be looked into definitely a bit more.
We'll have to take a pause right there. When we come back, hear from one Assembly lawmaker on what it will take to get the state budget finished on time. Be sure to stay tuned for the rest of this full interview. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. The State of the State drawing various reactions from lawmakers. Here's Assembly Speaker Carl Hasty explaining why he called this year's State of the State one of the best he's heard in his 25-year career.
I think it kind of touched on everything that people have been concerned about. All of the things that we've been talking about the last couple of years. We need more housing, childcare, which is economic development. So I'm just saying, I just think a lot of the things that people feel concerned about, public safety, the mental health crisis, she touched on many of those things that I think are important to families across the state.
Other lawmakers sounding off on what they would have liked the governor to address in her speech.
I also didn't hear her really dealing with the cost of energy, that home heating, energy costs for our businesses, particularly for manufacturing, is significantly higher than in other places.
Let's return to our other interview with Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley and Assembly Speaker Pro Tempore Pam Hunter to finish hearing their remarks on the governor's State of the State. Assemblymember Hunter, what would you say do you expect to be the biggest challenges as we move forward with the budget process?
Well, there's always a challenge with it being done on time lately. I think even if it's a couple days or, even a couple weeks later. But I do think we have $24 billion in reserves. This is not an insignificant amount of money. We have increased sales tax revenue. We do owe a bit of money back to the federal government for unemployment. And I know small business is happy with some of the comments and plans with small business. I think staying the course, not trying to put too much policy into the budget, that always provides to be a big problem with us being able to get it done on time. And I do think that we need to be really hyper-focused into unfunded mandates and making sure, because municipalities don't have any money and they're always asking the state for funding. So I do think we need to be laser focused on ramifications for finances after, we're looking at some of these big ticket items. What does that really mean as it's spread across all of our municipalities and, for the taxpayers?
And Leader Barkley, what do you expect to be some of the big challenges moving ahead through the budget process?
Well, I think we need to set the state on a trajectory that reverses course of what we've done in the past, has increased the cost of living in New York. And again, as I said, we're a very heavy tax and spend state. We have to change that trajectory that we've been on. And that's hard because you have to make difficult choices, particularly when it comes to spending. I've always said you don't have to cut programs, but we might not be able to, increase them at 5 or 6%. Every year. So that's where the governor, Pam correctly pointed out, we have had a lot of revenue coming this year. So that is good news. So maybe some of those hard decisions aren't going to be as acute this year, but that's just this year. And there is predictions that the out years coming forward are going to be much more tough. So I'd like to begin that process now. Well, it's easier while we have the revenue to maybe slow that growth of spending. And again, I would agree with the other side of the ledger. Again, cutting taxes, I think, is a good way to balance that other side. So it's going to be a challenge, as is every year, to come up with a balanced budget. But I'd like to go a step farther to make sure not only balance, but we set policies in place that will help us in the future.
And my last question to both of you is, do you have a message that you would like New Yorkers to hear? I know we just started the legislative session, but as the months go on, anything that you would like them to know?
I'm happy to start. First of all,
sure.
Just like anything, beginning of the year, beginning of legislative session, I'm always optimistic. I love New York State. I love representing New York State. I know we have some serious problems, but I would say to every New Yorker that I will work in good faith with my Republican colleagues, my Democratic colleagues in the legislature, and with this governor to move this state forward. And the way we got to do it is addressing those two, I think the biggest issues, the two issues, are affordability and crime. And I look forward to working with everyone to try to find solutions to those issues.
Assemblymember Hunter?
Yeah, I think folks should be hopeful. It's a new year. I want, folks to think this is just beginning. It's a marathon, not a sprint. If you don't see something that you thought was really important that wasn't included in the budget, it doesn't mean it's not going to be in there. This is just the very beginning of our conversation going forward. And I think the governor has heard the constituency of New York. And I think working with the legislature, we're going to be able to deliver some meaningful legislation and resources back that really are going to help people in their pocket, in their homes, and their quality of life. And that's all we want. I think, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, I think that's what all New Yorkers want, is just a good, solid quality, better quality of life, and be able to afford wherever they live, however they live. And I think that's going to be important for us to deliver. And I think we have the commitment from the governor to be able to do that.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. Assembly Member Pam Hunter, thank you so much for joining us, as well as Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley. Thank you so much. Governor Hochul laying out more than 200 proposals in her State of the State address. Some of those would have a big impact in New York City. When we return, hear from Pix 11 reporter Henry Rossoff on possible changes to the city subway. Welcome back. Governor Hochul announcing several initiatives in the State of the State that will impact safety in New York City's subway system. Joining us now to discuss this and other proposals impacting the city is Pix 11 reporter Henry Rossoff. Henry, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here, Jamie.
So let's talk about subway safety. How big of a concern is this for New York City residents?
Well, even though crime hasn't really ticked up on the subways, we've seen a lot of high-profile random violence, random stabbings, and even a man lit on fire. I'm sure that's something that even made news where you are. So it's been a lot of high-profile crime, really disturbing crime, and that's why you saw the governor lay out essentially, 3 initiatives. The first one was more barriers on the subway to just harden protection against the potentials of pushes or falls, and then more police officers, in fact 2 on every subway train overnight. She's picking about half the overtime for that. City's picking up the other half. And then she came out and really forcefully said that she'd be in favor of lowering the threshold for involuntary holds for people who are clearly can't take care of themselves, maybe if they get pushed over the edge, the potential of committing violence against subway commuters. And the mayor's been pushing this for a while, so now you have the city and the state on the same page here.
Hey, I was going to ask, how are city leaders responding to her proposals?
Very supportive. Both the mayor and also many of the people running for mayor. We're in the new year, so the Democratic primary really heating up in the city. But everyone generally supportive of this, but a lot of people saying it doesn't go far enough, meaning we're not seeing more mental health workers or outreach workers on the subway. I actually asked the mayor directly a few days ago if with these additional police officers we would be seeing additional outreach workers, and he said no, that's just not possible. There aren't enough of these people to go into the subway and do this sort of work. So the police will be the first line of defense here as far as encountering mentally disturbed people on the subways. And not everyone likes that idea or thinks it's a good idea, because it's very different when you see an outreach worker versus a cop. It elicits a very different reaction. So some of the criticism has been around not being enough on the mental health side, more being on the policing side.
And I understand that it will be 2 police officers on each subway car?
Yeah, that's correct. Again, paid for half by the city and half by the state. And the mayor just laid out in his budget just this past week that he's not going to be afraid to spend overtime on the police. I mean, there's been sort of this steady movement since the defund the police movement 3-4 years ago, where people have really scrutinized overtime at the NYPD. And now you have Mayor Adams, who's never been afraid to hand out the overtime, and this time specifically budgeted more overtime this year and defended it, didn't mince words, said, I will spend whatever I need to spend to keep New York safe. Others say that, there could be better ways to do this, again, pointing to maybe more mental health resources as opposed to more police resources.
And she's also cracking down on people who aren't paying their subway tolls.
Yeah, we actually saw a pilot program launched just this past week where they put, they're calling them spikes, but it's really just think of like the edge of a saw almost, kind of these saw-like looking things put so people couldn't hop over the turnstiles. I can tell you, living in the city and riding every day, that's generally not the way people are getting through. They're kind of pulling back the bar and sneaking through or going under. So some criticism of that approach, but the MTA saying it's going to keep trying some novel things to stop the fare evasion.
We'll have to see what else can be done. Thank you so much, Henry, for joining us.
Great to be here.
Stick around and we'll be back with a look at the week ahead. If you have a comment or story idea, let us know. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Empire State Weekly with the governor's State of the State. New York is entering budget season. On Tuesday, the governor will present her executive budget, explaining in detail how she plans to pay for the programs she brought up in her address. After that, both the Assembly and the State Senate will present their one House budget, which will act as a rebuttal to the governor's executive budget. Then the governor and the legislature will negotiate and deliver a final budget on April 1st. The budget was late last year, so we'll keep an eye on how it will go this year, and we'll continue to bring you updates. For now, from all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm Jamie DeLine in Albany. We'll see you here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across New York.